When an enraged elephant weighing 5 tons caught an adult buffalo, it lifted it and started shaking it before throwing it to the ground, showing its opponent that it was more dangerous than a pride of lions. The elephant literally pinned and trampled its adversary into the ground, crushing its spine, ribs, and skull. You will see other epic cases where herbivores prove they are not inferior to predators in strength and aggressiveness. The elephant is an animal you would never want to encounter when it's in a bad mood. The elephant is the largest land animal in the world and almost doubles in size the giants that hold the honorable second place. Cool, right? It turns out that the elephant is on another level of physical power, as it weighs about 5 tons. Moreover, it has an entire arsenal of weapons. With its tusks, this beast is capable of delivering terrible stabs, keeping the enemy at a distance, striking it. The elephant is also capable of fighting with its trunk, like a powerful whip as thick as an arm. But the most terrifying thing is, of course, the charge attack of this enormous monster. When it lunges at a target, almost no one can resist. The elephant is capable of demolishing a small house, and a passenger car will be nothing more than a toy for it, especially considering that the beast is almost twice as huge as many car models. It is particularly impressive when such powerful and enormous animals defend themselves against numerous predators. In this case, near the wild dogs, there was a family of giant big-eared animals. By the way, elephants need huge ears for their thermoregulation. When the blood circulates through the body, it cools in the ears. Now you know why elephants need to move their ears to cool down and also to express certain feelings. They are social animals with highly developed intelligence and emotional bonds. When the mother elephant realized that the wild dogs threatened her young, well, the predators can only be pitied. Although herbivores usually behave calmly at first and ignore the presence of other animals without expressing any aggression without reason, elephants can assess the situation instantly. And the elephant realized that this small army of predators had not arrived here by chance, but was devising a hunting plan, gradually surrounding her calf. The main advantages of the wild dogs are their speed, agility, intelligence, and numbers, especially the numbers. They gather in hunting parties more numerous than any other predator in Africa. Not even hyenas can boast of so many fighters. For a baby elephant, it is a threat. But the furious mother doesn't care about the tusks of her opponents. She lunges at them in an epic and spectacular way. Dozens of wild dogs scattered like a huge wave breaking from a rock thrown into the water. The elephant was ready to trample any enemies in her path. She could easily lift a wild dog with her trunk and throw it a distance several times the length of the enemy's body. And if the hunters were hit by the giant's charging attack, the elephant could take out several predators in a few seconds, and the wild dogs realized this. They retreat, maneuver, and dodge. For a while, the hunters still hope to deceive the enemy, lure her closer, distract her from her calf, and attack the baby while the female is busy fighting with the distraction group. But the elephant is too smart, acts decisively, and has unexpected speed for a beast of this size. Little by little, she gets closer and closer to them, and the lives of several hunters are already hanging by a thread. The wild dogs had greatly underestimated the alertness and irritability of the elephants. These herbivores will never ignore a threat directed at their family, so the idea of hiding and then attacking the elephant calf from behind was stupid. When the wild dogs tried to circle the family from behind, the elephant once again showed who was in charge and counterattacked the predators. With one swift move, the herbivore drove them away. This epic showdown seemed quite cinematic, didn't it? But for the sake of their young, elephants are prepared for true feats. So there's no doubt, even if each wild dog were the size of a lion, that wouldn't have undermined the determination of the mother elephant. Her bravery, her devotion to her family, and her speed deserve your like, don't you think? African buffalo are used to elephants being enormous neighbors, but usually calm and intelligent, whom they need not fear. But this giant does not like having its personal boundaries violated. Immediately, it struck the stunned buffalo on the head with its trunk, as if it were a whip. And since the buffalo didn't take the hint the first time, the elephant attacked with full force. If the buffalo hadn't backed off, the giant would have trampled it. Thus, the herbivorous animals showed that they can be tougher and fiercer fighters than the most brutal predators. This buffalo made a very serious mistake when it decided to fight with a rhinoceros. Of course, the buffalo was trying to protect its herd, but it got carried away. Or maybe it decided to show off in front of the females or increase its authority in the hierarchy of its clan. In any case, it's clear that the horned beast didn't realize who it was dealing with. It seems that the rivals are approximately in the same weight category, but that's not the case. Sometimes the weight of a Cape buffalo can exceed half a ton and approach a ton. That is a lot, considering that enormous strength is combined with ferocity and fearlessness. But against a rhinoceros, it is by no means enough to face it head-on and expect to succeed. The rhinoceros is one of the most powerful land animals in the world. With a weight of more than 3 tons, it rivals the hippopotamus for the title of the second largest giant after the elephant. The rhinoceros is a strictly herbivorous animal, but it is armed as if it were hunting every day. It has an armored body, as its tough skin has become incredibly strong, as if it were made of stone. Curiously, in relief, it looks like Roman armor, and in Asian rhinoceroses, it is more pronounced, although these animals are smaller than their African relatives. But you can never win a battle by only defending, so the rhinoceros's offensive weapons also play an important role. Its powerful horn is a dangerous weapon, capable of delivering terrifying upward stabs. This is the rhinoceros's favorite move, and practically the only one it uses with its horn. But don't think the beast's arsenal is limited. This strike is very dangerous because it usually targets the enemy's belly, throat, and legs. Stabbing blows are more dangerous than slashing ones because they penetrate deeply into the internal organs, and a horn, as long as the rhinoceroses can, pierce the enemy from side to side. In some cases, this animal's horn reaches the length of an adult man's arm. It is not made of bone, but of keratin. It is the same substance that forms your nails. Have you looked at your fingers to appreciate them right now? Of course, the keratin layer of human nail plates is relatively thin, while in the rhinoceros horn it forms a very dense structure. And with the momentum of the charging attack, this tactic becomes almost a definitive tactic. When a 3-ton enraged rhinoceros charges into battle, it will simply trample its target, or disembowel it, or knock it back and send it into a deep sleep, making it absolutely dangerous, as it is capable of piercing the opponent's stomach. The most interesting thing is the character of the rhinoceros. These animals are surprisingly fearful, and on top of that, have very poor eyesight. So it can happen that a rhinoceros is walking calmly without bothering anyone, and suddenly, a blurry spot in front of its nose becomes a very concrete object. And it turns out that it is not a bush, but, for example, another herbivore, a predator, a bird. It could be anything. That's why the conceited rhinoceros will fight with the same fierceness against a buffalo as against a hungry lion. The herbivore does not pose a serious threat to the other herbivore, but the rhinoceros does not care about that. It is determined to give its opponent a painful lesson.
Moreover, it is very possible that this epic fight ends fatally for the buffalo, because the rhinoceros also cannot stop in time or simply has a different idea of when to stop.
The rhinoceros can get nervous in the presence of any animal, from a giant elephant it might not have seen in time, to wild dogs, which only pose a threat to a 3-ton animal if they gather in a really large pack. And the rhinoceros always reacts the same way when it gets scared. It attacks. And when a rhinoceros suddenly charges at an unsuspecting animal, it's terrifying, right? And the 3-ton giant acts with a lot of determination, roughness, and brutality in battle. It charges at the enemy, knocks it down, and delivers powerful, sharp, and short blows with its horn to cause maximum damage to the victim of the attack.
The scene is terrifying. It looks like a steamroller has run over the buffalo.
One cannot help but feel sorry for the buffalo. Interestingly, there are quite a few cases of conflict between these species. Bovids do not like being attacked without apparent reason and often underestimate rhinos, not realizing that they are 5 or even 6 times more massive and strong than the ungulates. As a result, the rhinoceros is not only capable of skillfully and lightning-fast circling the opponent from the side and crushing it from below up to the belly, but also of lifting the buffalo completely off the ground, all 4 legs. The hoofed beast is in shock, as it rarely even jumps, and here it is lifted by its adversary right at the start of a frantic fight. But what makes the buffalo barely endure is the terrible pain from the blow. The rhinoceros's horn is very sharp, and the victim's skin barely withstands it. The other members of the herd do not have time to come to the rescue. Although the rhinoceros is very heavy, it moves nimbly and quickly and instantly takes the initiative in close combat. Now, the buffalo's hope is not to win, but simply to survive. Even if the skin of its belly holds, the rhinoceros is capable of paralyzing the opponent simply by trampling it. The rhinoceros is not inferior to the most agile hunters in terms of cruelty. Animals cannot speak, and from the victim's point of view, the situation seems logical. A rhinoceros was standing still and now attacks you without warning. And when you weigh 3 tons, that's not your problem, right? Sometimes the surprise attack of a rhinoceros is simply terrifying, and sometimes the victim doesn't take the threat seriously enough, thinking the aggressor is bluffing. But when you see a rhinoceros attack, you shouldn't ignore it. But if you think a rhinoceros can take on anyone, and that animals weighing less than a car are like potato chips to it, you're wrong. This antelope doesn't pay attention to the fighting characteristics, reputation, and strength of its opponent. Despite being much lighter than the rhinoceros, about 15 times, which is the difference between a human and the largest buffalo, the antelope somehow manages to emerge victorious from these encounters. Its appearance is simply impressive. It even seems that the giant surrenders to its opponent or, on the contrary, mocks it and makes it believe it is superior so that the antelope relaxes and misses the deadly blow. But in reality, the situation is much more complex. Just like the tactics of a relatively small but intelligent and cunning herbivore, the antelope knew how to take advantage of its strengths. He got so close that the rhinoceros couldn't accelerate to charge. As the antelope blocked its opponent's head from one side, the rhinoceros's piercing blows were useless because the antelope's belly was too far away. Perhaps the rhinoceros even felt slightly surprised by the antelope's defiant behavior. Yes, it could have instantly knocked down its opponent, trampled it, broken its spine, or thrown it over its own head with a single accurate blow. But the fighter, stunned by such insolence, cannot assess the strength and weight of the adversary. We see the situation in profile, while the rhinoceros is pressured by a more active and proactive opponent who dominates the battlefield and does not allow the enemy to take advantage of its size. The other 2 rhinoceroses approached the battlefield, but instead of attacking aggressively, they seemed to try to resolve the conflict peacefully, as if their presence was simply to scare away the aggressive antelope. But it was not so. It is difficult to know why the horned herbivore behaved so brazenly. Maybe the antelope got carried away and can't stop, feeling its enormous strength. But considering the precision with which it moves, and the diligence with which it dodges the enemy to avoid being right in front of it in the defeat zone of the charge attack, the conclusion is different. The boldness and pressure seem to be what saves the antelope. If it lets its opponent come to its senses and prove that it is stronger, the rhinoceros will deal with it immediately. What do you think? A young elephant attacked an older one for a higher position in the hierarchy. Big mistake. The enormous elephant withstood the attack from its relative and responded with a powerful blow. With skill and dexterity, he stabbed his opponent with his tusks, charged at him, and pushed him directly into the tall bushes. The retreating elephant had its back to them and went through them, as it was being chased by a furious enemy weighing about 5 tons. These enormous herbivorous beasts demonstrated their unstoppable power and fighting ability not only among themselves, but also to all the animals that witnessed the spectacular duel. Now no one will want to intimidate the winner for a long time, probably years. We certainly wouldn't dare. To these lions, it must have seemed at first that today was the luckiest day of their lives, or at least of their hunting careers. The rhinoceros seemed stuck and immobilized. It still looked impressive with its huge head, but not as much as before. Was it perhaps injured? If not, why would it be so discouraged? After all, normally, a huge armored herbivore is ready to put on quite a show for the lions with aggressive charges, chases, and role reversals where the vegetarian beast attacks the panthers first. But this case was very different. The rhinoceros seemed indecisive and discouraged, and the lions fell into the trap. They began to surround their prey, slowly tightening the circle. Watch how the predators tilt their heads in eager anticipation of the battle for food. They are preparing for the leap and the brief final fight, almost without stalking. However, they have completely misunderstood the situation. The rhinoceros was not trapped in this swamp at all. It was simply taking a mud bath and had its head down just to rest. It's a very comfortable way to cool off for such a huge animal. It seems that the rhinoceros didn't even immediately realize it was being attacked and mistook the lions not for aggressors, but for neighbors in the pool. However, perhaps it was an insidious trap, and the herbivore wanted to teach the predators a lesson. When the panthers got close enough that only seconds remained for the final leap, their opponent reacted with lightning speed. Although the rhinoceros's vision is poor, at short range, it is excellent at judging how close the enemy is. The rhinoceros emerged from the mud effortlessly and instantly to let the intruders know it was ready for the fight, but only in its own way. The 2 young predators, a lion and a lioness, were stunned, but now they are ready to retreat soon. Only one lion is attacking, not the whole pride, but this is not a problem for the rhino full of strength. It ignores the most insolent lion's attempt to climb onto its back, as the predator's claws cannot penetrate its armor or even injure the enormous animal. It seemed to draw the cats closer, and then the rhinoceros lunged at them and quickly scattered them in different directions. Curiously, the rhinoceros seemed able to run with great speed and ease. It doesn't seem to exert much effort to reach its opponents. It simply enjoys realizing its own superiority. What could be better than a workout after a relaxing bath? The rhinoceros enjoyed chasing the lions like frightened kittens, making them feel like defenseless victims instead of fearful hunters. It's a lesson they will have to remember well, because on another occasion they might not have the chance to retreat with their lives and health intact. The enraged stallion decided to show its strength and charged at the camel, but the beast, more adapted to desert life, quickly calmed its opponent's fervor. He realized his opponent's bluff, who didn't dare charge at the taller animal and stopped at the last moment. Surprisingly, the camel didn't hit the stallion, but shouted at him. It really seems quite funny, like a scene of an elderly couple arguing. Or the camel is scaring the stallion away with its smelly breath. Who knows? In any case, it's funny.
For African animals, the night is not only the time to sleep, but also for the fiercest and most intense battles between predators and their prey.
Although unfortunately, human activity has considerably reduced the number of wild animals in all parts of the world, the population density of wildlife in Africa remains astonishing. Hyenas scour the neighborhood for carrion. Lions roam in search of larger prey. The porcupine tries to find a corner to rest, but is periodically disturbed by predators trying to bypass the protection of its quills. In short, there is a lot of life and activity. And finally, a young lion with a still small mane and his sister find a suitable prey, a young hippopotamus. It is quite a large and strong animal despite its young age. In fact, when a calf weighs around 1/4 of a ton, it can hardly be called small, even if it is young. The young lions pounce on the calf to attack. They also lack experience, because a mature predator would be able to kill such a tasty prey in a matter of seconds. But this pair turns out to be strong enough to overpower the enemy. The lion and the lioness, though with difficulty, roll the hippopotamus on the ground, overcoming its desperate resistance. The lions act with perseverance and aggressiveness, compensating for their lack of experience with vigorous action and quickly overwhelming the calf's resistance, finally dominating it. In a few minutes, they are capable of strangling their prey and obtaining food for the coming days. But one should not think that this little one had gone out for a walk alone. It might have strayed too far from its mother, but the furious female was striving to find her offspring and succeeded at the last moment. The female hippopotamus, stunned and furious, intervenes. Her calf managed to hold on long enough for her to hear its cries and come running to its aid. If you thought that hippos accustomed to living near water become slow on land, see how quickly the female charges to attack her enemies. She is as fast as a locomotive. The enormous female, weighing about 3 tons, takes only a couple of seconds to save her calf. The lions have to retreat. An adult hippopotamus is not easy to overpower. It takes the combined efforts of the entire pride to face such an adversary, and even then, it is likely that the lions will suffer casualties. The skin of the hippopotamus is very tough, and the rounded shape of its body prevents the enemy from grabbing and capturing it properly. But the main thing is the crushing force of the blow, the aggressive pressure, and the power. The mouth of the hippopotamus can fit the head of a lion, and the bite of this herbivorous animal is surprisingly strong and can crush the opponent's skull. Even without the famous tusks that hippos use to dig the bottom in search of algae, this fighter can use its jaws as a terrible weapon. Ultimately, the young lions had no chance and rightly retreated before such a formidable enemy that could have massacred them if not for the need to cover its young with its own body. A similar situation occurred here during the day. This little baby hippopotamus is really tiny. It has just been born and is completely defenseless against the large predators. It's an incredibly cute baby, isn't it? It's hard to imagine that in a couple of years it will become a giant, but that's still a long way off. For now, its mother has to keep it close to her, because at such a young age, it could be easy prey for any predator. It is weak, but well fed enough for predators to see it as a treat, like a crocodile, for example. The reptile was not going to mess with the adult hippos, but it saw the calf and launched an attack. Big mistake. The mother hippopotamus realized in time that the reptile was starting to take an interest in her little calf and lunged at the enemy. Of course, the enormous and fierce hippopotamus easily overpowered the reptile. Except that was not all. The lioness was watching the situation, waiting for the right opportunity for a crushing and lightning-fast attack. The calf was so small that the experienced lioness would have taken only a few seconds to deal with it. The lioness's plan was simple. Attack the little hippopotamus while its mom was away, knock it down with a running attack, strangle it quickly, and flee before the furious mom returned and crushed the enemy. It won't be possible to take the victim with her, but the lioness doesn't need to. The mother couldn't stay long with her baby's body and would leave. Later, she could return to the hunting ground and feast. It's a well-thought-out plan, don't you think? However, the plan didn't work. The mother was too attentive. She didn't get carried away by the unnecessary chase of the crocodile, but went straight back for her baby. That's what setting priorities is about. The mother hippopotamus intercepted the lioness before she could approach the calf. The enormous beast moved so fast that there were actual waves. The lioness escaped her opponent's fatal grasp at the last moment. The lioness is forced to retreat, a prudent action that saved her life. These herbivores should not be underestimated. A female hippopotamus saved her calf from 2 different predators in less than a few minutes. A young and strong lion was hunting a gazelle. It was much slower than the agile hoofed animal, so it decided to act more cunningly and devised a really clever plan to capture its prey. The lion decided to ambush the gazelle near the edge of the swamp and reveal its presence in advance from a distance that would allow the gazelle to move away from the enemy. But, in fact, the lion successfully calculated the direction of the herbivore's run so that the gazelle would run towards the deep and viscous swamp. The herbivore will get trapped there and won't be able to escape before the predator reaches it and breaks its neck with a single blow. At first, everything went as the predator intended. The gazelle got scared and ran straight towards the swamp. There it got stuck and was trapped by the mud, the mire, and the soaked earth. The lion, confident in itself, seemed to have experience with the mud, so it took its time and even drank some water while assessing the situation. It prolonged the time so that the gazelle would only get more bogged down, as it had no doubt that the herbivore would not be able to get out by itself in the next few minutes. And it must be acknowledged that in that, he was right. However, the predator underestimated the speed of its prey and its acceleration. The gazelle managed to cover a considerable distance from the shore before getting truly bogged down. Then the hippopotamus entered the scene. He immediately understood the situation and decided to intervene. But don't think of this giant beast as a superhero. It's a crazy brute that hasn't come to save the poor gazelle, but only to protect its territory. The fact is that hippos are some of the few aggressive defenders of their territory among all herbivorous animals. Why do they do it? While many herbivores feed in different places and migrate long distances, hippos prefer to settle on the shores of various bodies of water. In Africa, there are many rivers and lakes, but due to the warm climate, they often dry up. Hippos are forced to protect their favorite spots, but they do so in an incredibly brutal and harsh way. And a huge hippopotamus will drive away from its river or lake not only dangerous predators, but also any other creature. Usually, it's easy to provoke this beast. Just make enough noise to attract its attention and provoke its anger. It's like an old neighbor, but with the combative qualities of a Tyrannosaurus. So, although the lion was young and fearless, he wisely decided to retreat. It was a wise decision, as the hippos were clearly in a bad mood. Behind this enormous hippo was a less massive individual, probably a female. For them, crossing the swamp was an easy task, due to the fact that they were strong and powerful creatures. Additionally, their body shape allows them to move through the swamp safely by piling their entire body on it and distributing their weight through their belly. Therefore, the hippos do not get stuck and quickly catch up to the gazelle. Meanwhile, she finally got stuck and cried out desperately for help. But the gazelle didn't know who she was dealing with. The hippos have an appointment here, and these cries are very annoying to the already, to put it mildly, not exactly the kindest animals in the world. The male hippopotamus, clearly annoyed by the noise, went straight to the gazelle. A brutal massacre ensued. The male charged at the gazelle, biting and drowning it in the swamp, while the female calmly watched this display of strength. She seemed to enjoy it. Her skin was intact, but her internal organs had turned into a meatball. However, she was still alive. Who knows? Maybe if it calmed down and slowly, gently made its way to the shore, it would survive and recover from all the wounds. However, if a hippopotamus is in a bad mood, it will not rest. Another powerful blow, and finally, it pulls the gazelle from the swamp as if it were a toy, and with a terrible squeeze, instantly and brutally breaks its neck, spine, and limbs. Angering this giant turned out to be extremely dangerous. The lion was probably very glad to escape from this horrible scene, which only confirms how tough and fierce herbivorous animals can be. The rhinoceros and the hippopotamus are two contenders for the title of the second largest land animal on the planet after the elephant. An adult rhinoceros can weigh more than 3 tons, just like an adult hippopotamus. They seem to be evenly matched competitors, which only exacerbates the conflict between them. Of course, it's not that they are literally competing for the title of giant, but they already have enough reasons for enmity. Hippos are territorial creatures that allow or do not allow other animals to visit their watering holes. They usually allow visitors into their watering holes simply because they realize that if everyone crowds in at once, they will destroy everything. But even so, hippos like to show who's boss, and that's why they decided to banish this rhinoceros. Maybe they don't like feeling that they are not the largest inhabitants of this place, or maybe they are just in a bad mood. On the other hand, rhinos are not shy animals. They tend to be less aggressive, but they are easily provoked into fighting. In case of confrontation, they do not back down and charge at their opponent until the end. Rhinos are not used to being pointed at and driven away. They compensate for their poor eyesight with quick reactions. Often, a rhinoceros notices danger only at the last second, but immediately attacks the enemy and, thanks to its enormous strength, defeats almost any adversary. Or almost. That trick won't work with hippos. In this case, the rhinoceros realizes that it's better not to mess with 2 hippos, so it tries to maneuver in such a way that it can only fight one opponent at a time, but still it doesn't leave and doesn't retreat until it's too late. Big mistake. The hippos approach from the shore and block its escape route. They push it into the water where they have the advantage in maneuverability. There they can impose their conditions on the enemy and enjoy the support of the water, something the rhinoceros is not used to. The thick armored skin of the rhinoceros provides excellent protection. But then, the hippopotamus picks up the pace and charges at the enemy. Watch how the rhinoceros manages to deliver a powerful punch from below upwards. It's its characteristic move. With its sharp horn, it could pierce even the head of a huge hippopotamus, and, with a single blow, finish off the aggressor. Except it doesn't have a horn. Wildlife defenders cut it off. The rhinoceros body is a very valuable material on the black market, which is why poachers have been hunting rhinoceroses uncontrollably for many decades and exterminating them on a terrible scale. To prevent this, animal rights defenders capture rhinos, sedate them, cut off their horn, and then release them. The armor and strength allow the animals to defend themselves against most enemies, even without their main weapon. But facing a hippo without a horn is not possible. Reflexes cannot be removed so easily, and the rhinoceros strikes the hippopotamus with the cut-off remainder of the horn. The blow was noticeable, but completely useless. The hippopotamus became even more enraged. The powerful beast knocked down the rhinoceros and submerged it while its enormous jaws sank into the enemy's body. The other hippopotamus protects the first one from behind. The rhinoceros tries to keep its head above water to avoid a fatal end. But that's all it can do in this situation. The enraged hippopotamus was literally hammering and shaking the rhinoceros on the bottom. Its powerful jaws clung to the relatively unprotected area under the victim's front leg. Apparently, messing with these hippos without having a horn turned out to be a bad idea for the rhinoceros. If the rhinoceros had had a horn,
the battle would have been fought differently, but this time, the hippo decided not to let its opponent out alive.
One cannot help but feel sorry for the unarmed giant. Musk oxen are heavy, sturdy, and strong animals known for their tenacity and firmness. They live in the tundra, and the harsh, cold climate perfectly matches their character. It is very difficult to intimidate them or make them flee, as they are always ready to face any enemy. When a herd of musk oxen detects the presence of wolves, they gather and form a defensive ring. In this defensive formation, the strong adult specimens stand shoulder to shoulder in the outer ring. There they cover each other from the sides, ready to use their horns to repel enemy attacks. Inside the ring are the less strong individuals, including the calves. Therefore, the loss of mobility does not bother the musk oxen who do not intend to abandon their family. This tactic allows them to repel attacks from numerous and dangerous packs of wolves. There is a pattern that applies to warm-blooded animals. The colder the climate, the larger they are. For example, the polar bear is much larger than the grizzly bear and the brown bear in terms of power and weight, even though they are close relatives. And the wolves that live in circumpolar areas and in the taiga are much stronger than those that can be observed in the temperate climate latitude. But the musk oxen continue to withstand this siege and stand firm like a rock. Their fur, very thick and hanging down, provides them with good defense not only against the cold but also against the enemy's fangs. Having said that, musk oxen, although they may appear enormous externally, are not such large animals. Relatives of sheep and goats, although they are several times larger than them, they are still 1.5 or even 2 times inferior to bulls and buffaloes in terms of weight. But the wolves underestimated their enemies and thought it would be possible to snatch the young from this protective formation or make the musk oxen tremble. Their tough character and courage are admirable. They withstand the constant, planned, and competent attacks of the predators. They do not give in to provocations and endure both the wind and a real snowstorm. The wolves feel more comfortable because, thanks to their active movements, they do not get cold, but the musk oxen stay still in one place. Of course, their fur protects them from freezing and hypothermia, but it is still uncomfortable. However, the herbivores do not mind. They protect their families and would remain standing even in a hurricane. By the way, an interesting fact. Scientists have studied the genealogy of musk oxen and have concluded that they are originally a mountain animal species. Their homeland is the Himalayas. During the last ice age, they came down from the mountains because glaciers and constant cold reigned almost everywhere in this part of the world. Musk oxen, extraordinarily stubborn animals, successfully spread to the tundra. When the glacial era ended, the species didn't survive in warmer climates and became extinct in the Himalayas, but in the northern circumpolar regions, they survived and adapted to the new habitat. Wolves do not know what they are up against. To defend their own, musk oxen use their impressive horns in an unusual way. This weapon is very effective for defense. Its powerful base acts as a real mace. Unexpectedly agile and fast, the musk ox can charge at its opponent with lightning speed and toss a large wolf as if it were a rag, breaking its ribs. The sharp tips hang down and curve upward, so the horns also protect the neck well on both sides. In case of an attack to the snout and neck, a musk ox can lift an opponent with the tip of its horn and injure it. Additionally, these herbivore fighters are also capable of kicking, striking with their front legs, and trampling their enemies in the snow. Although we must acknowledge the wolves' merit and admit that these cunning predators often manage to hunt musk oxen, it is not possible to effectively use their favorite tactic of long pursuit against them. Wolves like to chase a panicked victim for hours to pounce on it when the herbivore has run out of energy. But musk oxen do not run.
The confrontation between a herd and a pack of predators can last for hours, but the herbivores show equally impressive endurance and are quite good at conserving energy by leaning on each other. Which of the cases where herbivores demonstrated their power is most memorable to you? Respond in the comments and subscribe to our channel. We will see each other more often.